Robert, thank you for agreeing to this. This is the first of our Adventures in series. Had a good chat with Robert a couple of weeks ago, and there were just so many stories that we got into that it just felt like it would be a great opportunity to share some of those with the fractional community. Robert, if you wouldn't mind, can you give just a bit of background, your sort of brief bio as to what brings you here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Barry. And hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for spending your lunchtime with me. Hopefully, today's of some use. I'll try and give some sort of practical advice, stories from my own experience. And I'm sure like loads of us have got other stories to share as well from scaling. There's no sort of one set path for any of this. So, yeah, so mine will be through a people lens and through the lens of my own experience. In a nutshell, I've been forever in the people industry, if that's the right terminology. Starting off, similar to Barry, in a recruitment background, before sort of founding my own consultancy a little over 10 years ago now. That was predominantly focused on sort of talent management, talent acquisition, employer brand development, all for startups at scale ups. Predominantly that was in the fintech and technology space in Scotland. After that, I've spent the last 7 years working for Peak.ai, who are based out of Manchester originally. Now have offices across India and across New York, where I was Chief People Officer. I was number 5 in at Peak, and we scaled that to just over 400 through to a Series C round via SoftBank, 75 million a couple of years back. The last couple of years I was in New York, starting our New York North America operations over there, and have recently, so end of last year, finished my 7-year stint at Peak, moved to Lisbon and set up my own fractional consultancy, fully focused on the people side of things, do both fractional people work and coaching and mentoring for others in the people space.
Fantastic. Thanks, Robert. So I've been running this fractional group now for just over a year. Obviously, Chelsea helping me massively as well with that. But one of the things that we found is increasingly people are finding ways to do this from abroad. So maybe not a question for right now, but maybe afterwards about what that's looked like now working in Lisbon and consulting with various clients. But yeah, I'd like to dive into the scaling thing then. So let's start with the early stage startups, pre-seed startups, so people just getting started. And do you know what? I'm going to start with a quote that we had recently. So I know some of you are involved with the initiative that we run, the F4 initiative, which is introducing mentors to early stage founders. Somebody signed up for that, and they wrote, this is word for word: "I'm about to embark on building an MVP and face tough decisions when it comes to funding. I'm unsure whether to use white label technology, join an incubator, or take on a CTO or developer. I've also considered crowdfunding to build an MVP." And I think I love the quote because it highlights the challenges in those really early stage businesses, especially tech businesses, where you're like, I don't know where to go, what my first hire should be, and how to do that. Can you talk a bit around that, like how an early stage founder might look at a question like that, how to, their first few hires and what to look for?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot to unravel in that, isn't there? Because I think so much of that depends on, as the founder or the original founding team, what's your objective? Like, what are you trying to achieve with your business? Are you trying to bootstrap it? Are you going on the VC funding train? Really, what are you looking to achieve, right? Because that's going to dictate the kind of person, the kind of hires you need to make, the journey that you're going on. And it might seem early to start thinking about some of that. Some people don't think about it till a bit later on. But I really think, what's the key? What is the objective you're trying to achieve, right? And then that'll help dictate it. And I think what I've seen in really early stage founding teams is where's that founding? Where is it coming from? So I'm sure many of us have seen the Index Ventures report that was put out this week, and if you haven't, well worth a look. Scaling Through Chaos is a great read. They find in there that 75% of founding teams are co-founders. Very few are one-person bands. Although Sam Altman's theory this week of we're going to see our first one-person unicorn business due to the advances in AIs maybe throws a spanner in that works a bit. But I think that the key in that sense is most people have probably got have got a co-founder. They've met them somewhere along the line on the journey, either in work or through networking, etc. Complementary skill set, often the way. Most people would say, I suppose that's there's a good, should be an ideal mix would be the original team will be a mix of technical know-how if you're building in a technical space and commercial savviness as well. Now, I think that's an ideal world, right? So lots of the businesses I've seen, very few have actually had that mix. This could just be my experience, but they've either been technically minded founding team or quite commercially driven founding team. And that mix doesn't always, isn't always there. So I think the first thing is know your strengths, and I'll probably come back to this theme quite a bit through today, is as a original founding team. And I think this works in just founding teams within businesses as well as actually founding a business. Know your strengths, right? Where are you strong? Where are you weak? Where is your knowledge? Where is your business going? What are you looking to develop? And that complementary layer at the start is massively important. And then one more point on that, I think having a cultural and value alignment is absolutely crucial at that point. Now, a lot of businesses might not think culture values matters when you're 1, 2, 3 people. I will always make the argument that it's one of the first things you should think about if you're starting on that business, because the first hires, the first people you bring into the business, it's so essential they're culturally or value aligned to what you're looking to do, because that's the foundations that everything is going to grow from.
Okay, brilliant. Again, lots to unpack there, right? So I've seen this go wrong often. I've seen a lot of the time co-founders rush into business together, are very quick to be like, look at the good sides and ignore the bad sides, and of course you get that excitement, the initial buzz, lots of work done, and then things start to go wrong. And I've seen, honestly, it's like heartbreaking. Some of these businesses just fail, and they're never going to go forward just because of these things not being done properly. So how do you, what could you do if I'm a co-founder or this woman that was speaking to us about this, what can she do to make sure that those first hires are culturally aligned, they are the right fit for a long-term future?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing is have the conversation and define your culture or your values, and they are separate things, and we could get into that conversation, I'm sure. But let's actually sit down and define it. So Peak, where I mentioned I worked beforehand, I said I was number 5 in. One of the good things they did there, the 3 co-founders that they had, that they spent, and they nearly fell out about it, but the CEO spent $5,000 on and he didn't need to spend $5,000 on it, but just did it at the time. I can do it a lot cheaper on a values and culture definition session, because they knew we were going to grow. We know we're going to be a VC-backed business. We know that this is getting our culture right is essential to our growth journey, and defining that early on and going through a process of actually writing it down is something I don't think, it doesn't happen. Most businesses don't. Loads of startups don't think about it till a bit later on the journey. But getting that early and having that conversation means, therefore, you're far less likely to run into trouble down the line. Look, 1 year, 2 years in, when things get hard, and we all know things can get really bloody tough in the scale-up world, and that's what tests your culture, and that's what tests your value alignment. So yeah, you're busy, you've got a million things going on, you're trying to get everything in place to start your business. But I would always argue that's one of the most fundamental things you can possibly do. Define that, write it down. It can change in time. It doesn't need to be definitive whatsoever at all. And then you build your business around it. So why is your culture the way it is? If you're intentional about it, really thought through, that will also then unlock the doors of who I should hire, when I should hire as well, because you'll know the foundations to build off from there. And then in a co-founding team, yeah, look, it happens. People fall out. Life happens. Priorities change totally. You see it a lot. So again, I think in almost all the businesses I've started in the really early stage ones that I've worked with, very few have actually had the conversation about what happens if something goes wrong. Like, what happens if we fall out? How do we divide this up? Is one of us going to be happy not being in the SLT down the line, not being on the board down the line? egos get involved, etc., etc. But having the conversation and forcing that conversation early on is an absolute win. And again, a lot of the people stuff I'll say that I preach is you can avoid big problems down the line by addressing the conversation really early on, and probably early on that most people think is necessary.
Interesting. Okay. So if someone was bringing you in, so let's say 3 people on this call were just like, yeah, let's build a business together. And they're like, let's just do this thing that Robert suggested, this, make sure we're all aligned. What kind of questions they brought you into to run a workshop or something like that, a session that would run that? What kind of questions could you ask to understand that, to get to the kind of the bits underneath, to make sure the deal breakers that might create a problem?
Yeah, I mean, this is a fun session to get into. So the first thing is why, right? Why are we doing this? Starting a business, starting a scale up is bloody hard going. I'm sure all of us on this call know that, like I said earlier. So why are we doing it? What are you looking for it? What are you wanting to get out of it? Are our objectives aligned is the first thing. If it's someone's in it for the short term, that could work, but are we in it for the long term? Are we wanting to go through to IPO? Are we wanting to build an exit? What's your motivations, and do the motivations align? Is almost the sort of first port of call. Doing a value and culture exercise also helps with that. So do we have similar values? What do we like? What don't we like? What do we stand for? What do we stand against? What's the purpose? I love getting into the sort of purpose, the definition session. Because this all comes out, and it's much easier to do with a smaller early stage team, because you can get right into those conversations. You can be very clear about that. I like to get people to do some form of psychometric work alongside that as well, if they're available to it. So any one of the tools out there helps, because you can also use that to start a conversation as well, right? What are my personal motivators? What am I interested in? Share that, read it in advance. Have we got similar values but complementary skill sets as well? So I think getting into those conversations, Barry, is it's great fun. It's really good, and it'll show the cracks, and you have to prod and weave a bit the people in there to do it. But you also have to ask about, right, what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if 2 years down the line you end up moving to Australia? How does that work? How does the equity divide up in that case? Are you happy with CEO, co-founder originally maybe having more of an equity share than other founders? That's a very common structure. So probing some of these questions will bring those conversations out. And again, just even having the conversation, I'd say you're well ahead of the curve in that sense.
Yeah, amazing. And I can really see how an external person brought in to steer some of those conversations, and sort of like marriage counseling before there's an issue, right? Could really help get to the root of those things. Okay, cool. Brill. Right, I'm gonna move on. So moving to actually one quick thing I'm gonna say on these early stage companies. Now, I'm sure most of the people on this call are going to be biased in their answers on this, but fractionals, short-term people versus long-term people, can it work at the early stage? Is it right? And do you have any opinions on, so again, at very early stage co-founder teams, on bringing fractionals in to add value to those organizations?
Yeah, it would surprise you to know I've got some opinions on it and do it, definitely. I think it's really interesting, actually, we've all been around in a fractional capacity, and now the fractional term is out there, and what is fractional? It's being have a view that the fractional term is being abused somewhat and changing around. It's not contract, it's not interim, it is purely that space. But I think the acceptance of using and seeing the advantage of using fractional talent far early on in a startup's life cycle is something I think that's really come out in the last 12 months in my experience. Now, one of the companies I'm working for at the moment, there's a CEO who's the founder. 4 of the rest of the leadership team are all fractional. And I haven't seen anywhere like that yet. I'm really interested to see how that's going, how that's going to pan out. You can definitely see that it's going to really help fast forward that business in many ways, right? Then you don't need to make some of the same mistakes that happen. Okay, there's an argument that you're going to miss out on some of the learning, maybe the pain that you go through. Fair point, but you can definitely see how that's going to fast forward a certain point. Now you're going to need some permanent people in along the journey, definitely. But almost all the early stage businesses that I work with, there is not just me, there is other fractionals in the leadership team, and you can see so clearly how that knowledge of people who have been there, got the t-shirt, etc., before, is able to fast forward the business, not make certain mistakes, get to a point quicker than others. So yeah, I'm all in on, I think, the power of fractional within that space. Caveated with, most successful startups have a 2 or 3 people founding team, I think, as well. So again, take it back to that point. If you know what you're strong at, you know what you're not, what you're weak at, you know what you're looking to achieve in the short, medium term, complementing that with fractional talent is a massive unlock, I think, for a business. Massive.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Like, we're seeing it more and more and more. Obviously, I speak to about a fractional a day now, from running this group, and we're seeing more and more fractionals get involved in these early stage businesses, and as you say, like, being able to accelerate very quickly. I think when you hire the right person, when it's the right fit, and there needs to be the same kind of due diligence in hiring a fractional as there does a permanent person. But when you get the right one, yeah, wow, it's having a massive impact. Okay, so moving on to the area around when we start to scale. So let's say that we're looking to now raise some money. Obviously, a big part of that is going to be, what are you planning to spend that money on? And so considering how to start thinking about the people that will be part of that growth plan, how do you begin to answer those questions? How do you think about, we are this small team and we're going to grow. Who do we need? It's obviously such a massive area. How do you start thinking about that kind of space?
Yeah. So again, I think the very starting point is looking at our talent, like talent density, to phrase de rigueur at the moment, within that original team. So probably, where are you at? Somewhere between 3 and 5 to 10 people, maybe around that stage. Again, what are the strengths that you've got? What are the weaknesses that you've got? There's a bias, obviously, in sort of like funding circles, if we're talking funding, towards looking at the technical capability of early stage teams, right? So if you're building product, SaaS product, enterprise product, you don't have somebody who has been on that journey at some point before. Okay, look, there's an obvious place for somebody within that space, I would say, whether that's fractional or perm or not. But taking a lens through your strengths and your weaknesses, the skills you've got, the skills you haven't got, etc., etc. So just saw Barry's comment there. Is the absolute starting point, right? There's a temptation, I think, in a lot of early stage businesses to make sort of like hires based on, you met someone great, they've got energy, they've got the passion, you just know, they're a good person into the business, right? Yeah, we'll just hire that person. It's a reactive hire, not a proactive hire. So again, trying to get your company structure, where are the gaps? Where do you want to be in 12, 24 months time? Now, I know that can be like a nonsense exercise almost to look through when you've got 3 months worth of cash in the bank. Where do I want to be in 24 months time? But actually, even putting that down on paper will force you then to think about, right, I think this is where the team size, this is the engineering capability, this is the sales capability that I'm going to try and need to get to that point. And that'll help with that exercise. But again, a lot of early stage businesses don't think like that. They will hire friends, people from the secondary network, good people, energy, generalist, all-rounders. You need that early on for sure. But I really sort of thought through the best businesses I've seen. And a lot of that will come from second, third time founders, actually, who have been on the journey before, know what they're doing somewhat, will know their own strengths and weaknesses. That's when they'll start to make those key hires within that early stage piece. So it's been really, really trying to nail that down as clinically as possible. I think is the key bit.
Okay, fantastic. And one thing you brought up when we spoke initially was around the importance of, see if I can remember it, was trying so hard to prove that you needed the hire. and you're trying to prove that you don't, that kind of that constant friction there. Can you talk a bit around your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of part of how how the world's changed quite rapidly in the last couple of years, right? So someone like me as a chief people officer, for a long time, my job would have been, right, okay, we're just going to, the business is going to double. We're going to triple this year, triple next year, double, double, double. How do I get more headcount in? How do I prepare for that kind of scale? And my lovely, vanity metric of, I've hired 400 people over the course of the year. That's been flipped on its head, right? Quite radically over the past 2 years, to my job almost becoming like the gatekeeper of hiring. Do you really need to make this hire? Well, justify it. Tell me why you need to make this hire. Not everyone agrees they are up ahead or up ahead, and I get that. But also, that's a good metric to look through early on. How is this hire actually going to shift the dial here? Can we automate things to an extent that we don't need to make that hire? So you're almost trying to like really, really justify and really scrutinize why that hire needs to be made, and are there other ways around it now, especially sort of early on, right, where cash is, cash is absolutely king, and cash is harder to come across at the moment for some of these businesses. So it's a really, really interesting change how that's come across, and how my sort of role now is like, okay, deliberately talent design. Do you really need to make this hire really intentional about making that hire? Are we really at capacity? Et cetera, et cetera.
I really prefer the vanity metric as a recruiter approach to this, where you just double. That works much better than me. But the
quality over quantity, you can put your fees up for for absolute quality, definitely.
So if you are the gatekeeper, right? Obviously you're going to let some through the gate in this hire. So who do you let through? Like, you're obviously trying to say you don't need it. Can you automate it? Do you really need to justify it? Who gets through? Which hires get through? Which kind of which are the ones where you think, okay, fair enough, fair point, we really do need that hire?
So we're sort of mid-early stage, right? We're talking about the business at the moment. So again, going through those strengths. So where is the core part of that business, right? So one of the best businesses I work with, hopefully I won't give this away at all, is a very technically minded company, right? Two tech founders who have built it. Everyone within that business is a technologist. It kind of sells itself, and to an extent, what they're doing. But to go on, the post-10 people, they absolutely need to make commercial hires. They need to bring in some sales collateral into that business for them to grow. They recognize that. They know that. That's an obvious thing to do, right? You're just going to reach a glass ceiling where founder-led sales isn't going to get any further, et cetera, et cetera. That's obvious. Same on the flip side as well. So if you'll get to a stage where, as if you're product build, you can't build, you're not building it fast, and if you lack the knowledge of somebody to take it on to the next step, maybe the span of controls getting too wide, so you need to bring in another layer of management into there as well. Or you've got what you commonly see, you get to a point as well, is the founding team are spending too much of their time on the wrong tasks. And that's often a big thing. So sometimes I say a gatekeeper there. Sometimes I'm telling the CEOs, right, look, you sat up at midnight doing the payroll, you're paying invoices. That's great earlier on. You've got to do that. But now is the time when you're starting, you've got funding coming in. You've got limited time. You've got limited energy. You need to be focusing your time and efforts on where it's going to critically matter to make a difference to the business. Hand over fist with all that. So I think often there'll be technical hires for sure, because that's, we're in the technology space, that's where it's going. You need to develop the product, et cetera, et cetera. But having a key reason and critically looking at where time is spent, where energy is spent within the business, where it needs to go is the key thing. I don't think there's one right or wrong answer here, by the way. There isn't like a blueprint that, contrary to some of what Index Ventures say in that report, which I love. But I don't think there is a blueprint, because it's so dependent on that business, on the unique characteristics of that business. What are you looking to achieve? Are you bootstrapping? Are you on the VC growth tip? What's the product? What sector are you in? What's the skills and experience of the founding team? Are they first-time, second-time founders? All of these factors have to go into the mix before making those initial hires. But the one thing I will say for definite, to take that back, the value and the culture piece is absolutely critical in those first hires, for sure. for sure, because they're going to be the people who are going to then spread that throughout the business as you scale further. Once you get to 50, 100, those are absolutely critical cultural value hires.
Fantastic. Okay, and do you know what, that's a good way to lead into the final part then before we'll break for the Q&A, which is around culture. I know we talked about this before. I know you've got some very, very strong opinions on culture and the importance to get that done as early as possible. Can you talk around times where you've seen that work well, times where you've seen that not work well, and what's led to your strong opinions in this space?
Yeah, so I'll start with when I'm to not work well is when, if you've got a good idea, you've got a good business, you're going to get funding. Yeah, it's a good idea. You're solving a problem, etc., etc. I've seen several businesses, like some I've dealt with them, that you'll get to 40, 50 people. Probably you can force that through, as a CEO, as a founder, whatever that looks like. You can probably force your way to that if you've got a good enough idea, a good enough product. But I see many hit a wall at that point, right? Because you either haven't paid enough attention to culture, to people. The span of control of you as a founding team is getting out with your day to day. You're bringing in people who have then got influence over others within the business, and things can really start to fall apart at that point. You're growing fast, etc., etc. So if you haven't got a clearly defined culture, purpose, value set, you start bringing in people who are misaligned, who aren't aligned to that. You don't recognize your strengths. You've got an unevenly balanced workforce. All of these things hold up, and a lot of businesses are faltering at that point now. And I think that's also sort of played out in the scrutiny of funding at the moment. So Series A, Series B funding, you're looking through the lens of a lot of that. Is this business going to make it? Am I going to put my money into it at this point? That's become even tighter. So argue very thoroughly that needs to be, you get that right earlier on, those problems are not going to disappear, but they're going to be diluted massively later down the line, for sure. Where you get that right is this is the clear value set of people. This is the clear purpose. This is what we're looking to achieve. We all align behind that, and it makes your job so much easier if you have your business, the people, and your strategy all in alignment, all rowing in the same direction. The classic says you're not going to be, going all over the pulling in different directions, arguing your point. Politics creeps in, etc., etc. And so again, getting this right at the start is very clear. There's an interesting thing this week. I don't know if anyone sort of follows. Coinbase is a really good example, I think, of culture, right? It's not a culture that's for me, but it shouldn't be for me either. If you read their job descriptions and what they're trying to achieve, they're very explicit in what their timing is now. Coinbase is like, second wave of crypto. We're going to ride this journey. This is our time. We're going to go hard at it, etc., etc. They're very clear and very intentional on this second wave of their business and their culture that they're going through now. And again, it isn't for everyone. I read that job description. I'm not going to apply there. They don't want me to apply there. I'm the wrong person for it. That's great. They don't want attrition. They want to get the right people in the door, but they're intentionally going to hire the right culture fit to get them on this second wave of the journey that they're on now. And I really like that. I really like the sort of intentionality of culture at different stages will save you infinite amount of problems down the line, I believe.
Fantastic. And do you know what? There's one final question that's crept in from Corey, and I'm going to draw a line under that, and then we'll stop the recording and go on to the Q&A. But Corey's brought something up. We talked about it the first time, and it's so tightly linked with what we're talking about getting things right early on, which is around this diversity or diversity debt, as Corey's put it there, and getting things right early on. I know, again, it's a subject you've got strong opinions on and similar to the culture.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for the question, Corey. And I should have really said diversity at the same point as culture, because again, so many of these things, like if you're intentional about and you have to be intentional about it. I mean, won't get on too much of a rant here, but if a business cares about diversity, equity, inclusion, so forth, be intentional about it. There's a lot of washing. There's a lot of oversight of it. Oh, bit once a year for International Women's Day, but we've got a massive pay gap. We've all seen that kind of practice in business. And again, if you get that right at the start, or get it as right as you can at the start, it will pay off for you tenfold down the line. Just this week, right, I have one business that is very small. It is not diverse at all. They want to change that. They want to get that right. So we've written you've got enhanced maternity policy, a menopause policy. We've worked out ways that they can give back into the community, into the business now, like in advance of them being able to show that. So, the question comes up, yeah, this is our enhanced maternity policy. We don't have anyone yet, but it's going to make a difference. And these just getting these things right at the start, again, having that conversation is infinitely easier than getting to 50, 60 people and realizing you've got a problem and trying to turn around that ship at that point. It might not be a priority for everyone, but that's what I'm saying about being intentional is if you are intentional and you really do give a shit, get it at the start. Go from there. It's far easier to build on those foundations than it is to go back and refit them.
Fantastic. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate that. Right, I'm going to stop the recording now.